doing on this one? Oh, we didn't mic? Good morning, everyone. Great to see everyone. Hope everyone's healthy and safe. Had a wonderful week or days you've been here. For those of you joining us live stream around the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. I have the great honor and privilege of being the Director General and Dean of the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Sanjeev Khagram. We, along with the Global Futures Lab, our great partners, Peter Schlosser and Amanda and many others, run the university-wide SDGs initiative at Arizona State University. And we're so proud that we're ranked #1 in the United States for SDG impact and #2 worldwide. For Thunderbird, we're also very proud because we're #1 in the world for international trade and management. When you bring all that together as part of ASU, #1 for innovation in the United States, 9 years running, this deep commitment to global futures, obviously climate action, but climate positive, sustainable development. You've got a lot of incredible opportunities and capabilities to make a difference in the world. One of the other roles I play is now carbon removal lead for the UN Climate Champions. It's an honor and privilege to do that. The climate champions under Her Excellency Razan and Mahmoud are really a transformative force for climate action, not only here at COP, but throughout all our work over the years and going forward. And we also founded the Global Carbon Removal Partnership at Thunderbird and ASU with many partners, including many in the room today that we're going to get to introduce. It's particularly exciting for me to welcome this particular um, session. I was born in Jinja, Uganda. My family's from Uganda and Kenya. We were fourth generation before we were expelled in 1972 by Idi Amin. The continent is deep in my bones and my blood. And as many of you know, I often talk about my mother, who was born in Kitale, Kenya, which is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. She has advanced dementia right now. And I was talking to her before I came, and she said, "Well, what are you doing?" And when you think about what we're trying to do with carbon removal in Africa and around the world, how do you really explain that to your mother, to your children, to ordinary people in the world that are not inside the bubble of climate and COPs and sustainability? And so for her, the best way I could explain this, Mom, we put a lot of garbage into our atmosphere, into the air, and it's around us. We can't see it, but it's there, just like the unfortunate trash and garbage we often put in our rivers and our streets and our forests and so forth. And we need to remove it. And that makes sense to an ordinary person. Of course, we need to do waste management, and that's what, in many ways, carbon removal is. It's planetary waste management. But for my sons, who are 18 and 23, when they ask the same question, why are you going to COP? Although they are quite aware of what's going on, being very sophisticated young men, and my daughter, who's 9, uh, they ask, well, why are you going there? And and why is carbon removal so important? And for us, carbon removal is climate positive, sustainable development. It's green growth, sustainable livelihoods, it's job creations, it's economic opportunity. And it has the great additional tremendous benefit of having a positive impact on climate mitigation. A second point I'd like to make is we know all science, everybody agrees, it's incontrovertible now that we do not get to net zero, let alone to where we really want to go, which is getting the climate restored without uh, scaled carbon removal somewhere in the order, as the first edition of the carbon dioxide state of carbon dioxide report said, somewhere in the order of 400 to 1400 gigatons by 2100, average 740 gigatons. We are far from there, uh, and we have to advance tremendously. Uh, the second point we want to make is that for us, there's three critical pillars to climate positive sustainable development. Number one is, of course, adaptation. We know that unfortunately the climate has changed. We're at 1.2, 1.3 degrees Celsius above where we once were. We have 420 parts per million in the atmosphere. This is leading to many tipping points already, at least 5 happening, and many more on the way. And so we have to adapt. We have to create resilience. We have to make sure that, particularly the most vulnerable, are empowered to live, not only live, but hopefully and survive, but to thrive. Number two, we need deep and massive CO2 emissions reductions. It's not a question. It's incontrovertible. Whether that's through tremendous transformations in renewable energy systems, figure out new ways to reduce carbon emissions from hard to abate sectors. Every part of it must be done, must be accelerated and scaled. There's no question in our mind. But the third critical pillar that has to be part of the climate equation and climate positive sustainable development has to be removals. Profound, deep carbon removals, long term, that leads to sustainable development. So that's 1, 3. I often talk about the 3, 3, 6. So the first three is we need an adaptation at scale, and we need reductions at scale, we need removals at scale. The second three is very much that we have, and this is not perfect because all of these different types of solutions come together and converge in different ways. But for again, and the mass audiences, the citizens around the world, students in classrooms, elderly, there are really three types of carbon removal solutions: natural of various kind, engineered and technological, and marine based. Wonderful report from RMI talks about 32 solution pathways. I recommend it highly, that are in different stages of development, greater and greater understanding of these different pathways. Some are more online and ready to scale now. Many others, like ocean-based ones, a little bit further off into the distance, but we need all of them. It's the full portfolio. So if it's adaptation, reduction removals, it's also natural, engineered, and marine-based, ocean-based, and a portfolio approach. And finally, the six. What are the six? Carbon removals have to be responsible. We want to scale responsible carbon removals. And so what are the six key principles there that was brought together by an international consultation with stakeholders from around the world? Number one, carbon removals should advance equity and justice without question. Number two, they should be inclusive. Number three, they should be accountable. And obviously that requires transparency. Number four, they should be safe. We have to ensure that we do safe carbon removals. And that's something that requires continued research and development, monitoring and evaluation. Durable. We know the different solutions have different lengths of durability, and we have to bring together that portfolio approach. So when we claim that we're going to do 50 years or 100 years or millennia, we really deliver against that. And that's why we not only need MRV, but we need MRVR, monitoring, reporting, verification, and remediation, because we know that there can be seepage, there can be fires that can cut down our trees and forests, all of these things. And finally, the sixth principle is performance. We have to be cost effective, we have to be revenue generating, we have to create the green growth and green industrialization and the sustainable livelihood, sustainable development of the 21st century. Which brings us then to Africa. Africa is, as we put on the agenda, the sleeping giant, but it is waking up fast. And it makes me, no one is happier about that and pleased about that and ready to roll up his sleeves than me to support that. It is an incredible opportunity. The geothermal and other types of non-renewable energy or renewable energy sources that are available to power direct air capture and other types of new removals, the ocean and marine possibilities that are not immediate but can be harnessed if we do the proper research and development, indigenously led with partners from the global north and around the world, the nature-based solutions that are very much scaling already around the climate, around the continent. Conservation International with colleagues just put out a fantastic report called the Exponential Roadmap, and they are really creating a pathway for us to remove maybe 10 gigatons through natural solutions around the world, and a lion's share of that will come from Africa. We have the youth, we have the talent, we have increasingly tremendous leadership like President Ruto in Kenya, but many others. We had a wonderful meeting with President Macky Sall. Of course, he's stepping down, but his support, the president of Ghana. So it's a really impressive time. Let me end then before I welcome our incredible guest note speaker, our keynote speaker. We've launched a global carbon removal pledge. The pledge incorporates all of this, responsible carbon movement to scale, the 3-3-6, as I've been trying to emphasize, these key three pillars, these three broad approaches, the six principles, real ambition in terms of reaching 3.5 to 5 gigatons by 2030, 5 to 10 by 2040, 10 to 20 by 2050. We have governments now that are on board and advancing, led by the government of Kenya, but also the government of Ghana, uh, Colombia, Oman, many others, led by the Global South. So this COP has been another watershed for the carbon removals community worldwide. What's so exciting is that Africa and Africans are in the lead, from government to private sector to civil society to academic institutions to financing and so on. So with that, I want to bring one of the great leaders that has made this possible and continues to make it possible for, will make it possible for years and decades to come. James Mwangi, I first met him when we were both at Harvard. He was already a superstar, a global and digital leader, purpose-driven, committed to making not only Africa but the world a truly transformed place and space, bringing together colleagues and organizations across stakeholders and sectors, and really has led so much of what has happened on the positive side in many sectors across Africa. We couldn't be more pleased and honored that he's taken on climate with Climate Action Platform, with other efforts that I'm sure he'll share with you, and particularly advancing carbon removal at scale, responsible carbon removal at scale as the critical third pillar of climate positive sustainable development. So without further ado, James, my brother, please come up and share your wisdom.
Uh, Thank you, Sanjeev, for and all of you for being here, and Sanjeev for that very kind introduction and for your leadership in the space. I will not thank you for being so structured and thorough in introducing the case for carbon dioxide removal in Africa and how it will fit together, because I just had to toss out half of what I had to say. But it was you really did a fantastic job of laying out both the global imperative and Africa's potential role in it. I think what I'll do in order to add to rather than duplicate what you just heard, and also recognizing I'm sitting between you all and a very knowledgeable group of experts that'll have a panel discussion, is maybe put this in a little bit of context. And the context that has emerged for me over the last 3 years, obsessed as I was with the question of how do you transform African economies, and that actually being my entry point into climate, is this idea of climate positive growth. It's this idea that if we are to address the dual challenges of raising the youngest, fastest growing population on Earth into dignified livelihoods and a sustainable way of model of economic progress on the one hand, while avoiding global ecological catastrophe on the other hand, we need a completely new economic model that hasn't been accomplished anywhere. We need to break that almost unbreakable linkage between the level of prosperity. If you look anywhere in the world, your level of prosperity is almost linearly correlated with the amount of emissions that you generate. Sometimes that's very obvious because it's all very direct, and all the emissions that are related to your lifestyle show up in your country. Other times, it's a little bit hidden because the factories that make the stuff you're consuming, living a modern 21st century life, are sitting in some fast growing developing country that has its emissions really high, while your emissions are still quite high, but seem to be falling. So we need to find a way to boost livelihoods, boost economic success, boost standards of living without increasing emissions. Now, we know that we have this imperative to get to net zero by 2050, ideally sooner. We know we are nowhere close to that, and that over the next few years, thresholds like 1.5 degrees are all too likely to be crossed. Living in Kenya and where I grew up, I can see what that means. I can see what it means for climate change to already be exerting something like 5% drag on GDP across the continent today, which is only going to get worse, right? Because of the lost harvests, the floods, and so on. So that can't be allowed, and yet to grow, you typically have to emit. Arresting climate change requires us to do three things. It requires us to protect the natural carbon sinks that we have, ideally expand them. It requires to decarbonize every aspect of the way we live today around the world. as rapidly as we possibly can. And for decarbonize, read, remove all greenhouse gas emissions, right? We're also counting methane and various other greenhouse gases. And thirdly, it requires CDR. And the case for CDR and the scale of CDR we're going to need, which is multiple orders of magnitude away from where we are today, was very ably described by Sanjeev in his remarks earlier. And my argument is Africa uniquely, globally, is in a position to play a critical role in all three. The first one is obvious. We all talk about the Congo Basin. We all recognize the value of the grasslands and the mangroves and the need to protect them. Problem there is that the way that has typically been done is in poorly structured, low integrity, low quality projects, largely ran from outside the continent, that are done to the continent by outsiders. We're here to save this conservancy here. People, step aside, right? The second thing we need to do, that's the way it's been done before, that needs to change. And you'll hear from others later about the ways we're trying to change that on the continent. The second thing is industry, right? Or reducing global emissions. And everyone usually says, well, Africa is less than 4 or 5% of global industry right now. Why should we even look there? The reductions should be elsewhere. But we're in a globally integrated market. And where you currently do things is not necessarily where you should be doing things. We do things where we do today because fossil fuels are easy to move around and shift. A world in which the world's, Africa, which has 40% of the world's critical raw materials, 60% of its solar, and the largest growing working age population on Earth, should be the world's factory. And inherently, shifting to renewable energy powered industrialization in Africa should help the world accelerate its path to net zero. How does this tie to CDR? Because to get there, we need to build out Africa's renewable energy resources. And for that, one of the key ways to do that is through the energy demand that we will have from scaling up technologies like direct air carbon capture and storage, where Africa has, my country Kenya being a case in point, a lot of the distinctive resources to be global leaders in it. And so, interestingly, in that instance, you are not taking away from other decarbonization activity, right? It's very appropriate to point out that if you put up a massive DAC plant in Europe or in the US, you might as well use the renewable energy you're using to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to instead replace fossil fuel emitting energy generation capacity so you don't emit. That argument doesn't apply to the East African Rift, where we are investing in a company called Great Carbon Valley to actually develop green industrial hubs that can hold both DAC and other industries. But that's not the only technology. We also have plenty of land on which to spread biochar, taking some of the biomass that we have and permanently storing it and improving the quality of our soils. And we have the capacity to embrace technologies like enhanced rock weathering and apply them to managing Africa's soils, given our geology and the sheer scale of our endowment of land. Those are just three examples of the way the continent can play. But tying back to the lesson of carbon markets, I don't think 1.0. I think we're now in the failure of carbon markets 2.0 now, is we can't have this be an outside in thing. People somewhere outside flying into the continent saying, well, here is how we are going to achieve a climate benefit for the world, with Africans as bystanders, often fenced away from the very resources that are their heritage. We also can't show up and just assume that people elsewhere know how to do this stuff better than people on the ground. Young people around the world studying the same things are aware of the same issues, and chances are where you have the largest number of young people is where you will have the largest amount of potential innovation. So, what we need to do is embrace the idea that innovation in CDR in particular is an area where Africa has an inherent starting advantage. And is a space that we should focus on. And we should recognize that this is not something that's going to be done, that carbon dioxide removal scale, not something that's going to be done to Africa. It's not something that's going to be done for Africans. It's something that's going to be done by Africa. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Again, this is our incredible panel on carbon dioxide removal in Africa, waking a sleeping giant that is very much waking up. We just had an incredible keynote address by James Mwangi, who's really one of the great leaders, not only in Africa, but around the world. Now we have an incredible panel of individuals from the continent and working on the continent on really advancing, scaling, innovating, transforming the continent through CDR and climate positive, sustainable development. Rather than me introducing each of you, what I'd really like to do is start off by having you each introduce yourselves, because I want you to share not who you are, what your organization is, but why this means so much to you personally. So, Caitlin.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It's great to be here and speak alongside all of you. I'm Caitlin Whale, the founder of Kinjani, which is backing African talent based in South Africa, but looking to support individuals across sub Saharan Africa building solutions in carbon removal, but also climate resilience and circular economy. I really care about this because I've been working in the sector from a carbon removal fund for the past 3 years. And just as has been identified, there's huge potential on the continent. And I think there's a lot that we can do to help more individuals building companies in the space, and really excited to be speaking about some of those today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bianca Gishangi. So I'm the regional lead for Africa at VCMI, Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative. But currently, I'm also fully seconded to the Kenyan government at the moment at the Office of the Climate Envoy, based at the Office of the President. So I'm the Carbon Markets Advisor there. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Diana Maranga, Business Development Lead at Octavia Carbon. And Octavia Carbon is a direct air capture company based out of Nairobi, Kenya. And this conversation is incredibly important to me as a Kenyan native, born and raised, actively working on this deep climate technology and scaling it up. And, waking the sleeping giant. And that's what we're here for.
Thank you. And thank you to the Wrigley School of the ASU for hosting us. I'm Julio Friedmann. I'm the Chief Scientist at Carbon Direct. Carbon Direct is an end-to-end solutions partner for carbon dioxide reductions and removals driven by science. We've been in the business for about 4 years. We work on carbon markets. We work on advanced tech. The reason I'm here is the reasons that James laid out. We are seeing increasingly a drive in the carbon markets, in part because of the work that Bianca and others are doing, a flight towards quality. And as the market is splitting into two markets, high risk and high quality, we see the opportunity for high quality development in Africa to be unparalleled.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here. My name is Anna Tagaroza. I'm one of the co-founders of 1MTN. We are high quality carbon removal project developers in East Africa. We are planting bamboo on a degraded land. On the other hand, I'm also international climate lawyer. I have been working in a voluntary mandatory carbon market for 6 years already. And back in Europe, designing the same projects, I really felt that I'm not creating that much impact, and also that there is so much more potential that actually I can do with my knowledge. And that's how I shifted towards Africa. I'm very happy to be in Uganda and in Kenya with 1MTN. And our philosophy is that we would love to build this from the bottom up together, because that's how we are growing. And we also believe in 3Ps: people, planet, profit. With our project, we want to design it in a model that it actually makes commercial sense for everybody, especially for local communities. That's how it will be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I want to start with you, Julio, and just talk about from a science perspective. You've been doing this for a long time, obviously, your organization, but we're hearing obviously science is the frontier, sort of the pillar of climate positive, sustainable development. From a scientific perspective, why should we be so bullish on CDR in Africa?
Arithmetic. Really, it's very simple. If you just look at the IPCC scenarios, we need 1.6 gigatons of CO2 removal worldwide by 2030, 7 years from now. 1.6 gigatons. That's about a third of the whole oil and gas industry in terms of volumes. By 2050, we're going to need between 5 and 10 gigatons. That is between 1 and 2x the total volume of what the oil and gas industry moves around. So, and you just need the numbers to pan out. In order to do that, it will be all of the above. We will need nature-based solutions in volume. We will need soil carbon and trees and blue carbon. We will need hybrid solutions like biochar and BECS and bikers. And we will need fully engineered solutions like direct air capture and mineral weathering. And as James said at the beginning, Africa has an extraordinary resource base for forestry, for land, for basalt, for geothermal resources, for solar, wind, you name it. The opportunity set is there. And the last reason why, the science tells us we need a workforce we don't have. The thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else is the workforce issues. Um, if we're going to need to do 10 gigatons, we need 30 companies the size of Royal Dutch Shell doing it. That is a huge number of people. We need scientists, engineers, communications experts, financiers, regulators, communications experts. We need them all. That means you need a young, hungry workforce. And again, Africa cannot be matched in that regard.
Thank you so much, Julio. I want to go over to Bianca. Bianca, you know, obviously we need to advance, transform, reform the regulatory landscape. Um, how is that emerging? How are you driving that to make it possible to reach the kind of innovation and scale we're looking for in terms of CDR for climate positive sustainable development?
Okay. Well, I was hoping to hear from the companies first, but sure, I'll go right ahead. So we've been working on our climate change act, so now we can have carbon markets being regulated, and we're in the stages of finalizing regulations. But what's been clear is that the law is very explicit about the carbon markets applying to all types of carbon markets and to apply to reduction and removals. So, and it's also very clear on removals that are nature-based and technological. So opens the door for us to have that really deep conversation about that. But I think for us, it's also important that we always do reduction and removals because, like James was saying, we're developing. And it's very important that the technologies that are coming in for our green industrialization priorities are also focusing on the reduction technologies. So we need to look at them both hand in hand. But the other interesting thing about the regulation, like for Kenya, is that we will be working on a list which will be prioritizing different types of technologies. And we need to look at technologies that have the least emissions, highest cost, and the highest co-benefits to everybody. So if the technological solutions meet this criteria, then really we can discuss having them on that list as well. And then now we can have investment really flowing into the country. So I think just lastly to say that this is also a new area. So safety is incredibly important. There's a lot of research and development happening. So we really need to make sure that anything that is happening in the country is being done with safety in mind, but also sustainable development in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to go over to you, Annette, and come to the solution side. Tree planting, afforestation, hand, but also increasingly and getting a lot of pushback, a lot of criticism. What do you see is happening in this part of the CDR space? How can we continue to advance afforestation and related efforts to really continue to do what Bianca just said, safe, durable, climate positive, sustainable development solutions?
Thank you for this question. This is actually a great question that I've always really like to, answer because we are actually, as a company, we are looking beyond tree planting. Why we are talking only about tree planting? Why we are not talking about land degradation, land restoration? What we are doing with our approach, we are actually measuring the soil health. It's not only about tree planting. We are using bamboo as only a tool. And by the way, bamboo is regenerative. So it's sustainable timber in the end of the day. And regarding bamboo, there's a lot of good researchers out there, but we are partnering with local universities, and I'm proudly about our current project in Uganda. We have finalized 400-hectare plantation together with the local university. This is the local knowledge what we need, and we need to research the soil health and what our doings are actually doing. This is our risk monitoring as well, and together with different practices, what we have been implementing is it bee farming, is it intercropping? We actually need to measure the soil health in the end of the day. And trees are just a tool what we can use.
Thank you so much. It's really multiple interconnected natural solutions together that really gets us to scale and sustainability, safety, and durability. Thank you so much. Diane, if I could go to you. You mentioned a little bit in your opening, but it would be great, I think, for all of us and those who maybe not who don't know your incredible, inspiring story, how you really got into DAC, why Octavia is such an exciting place to be, what's going on with Octavia, a little bit, about the journey, and you then get to where you see the future going.
Okay. So my journey into dark was one of chance and passion, very dramatic. But I have a background in IT, so not from directed to director capture, but like a bright-eyed university graduate, I really wanted to make an impact and was very loud about it. And I got a call from Fiona, who's our growth and partnership lead, and was like, Dan, I feel like you can truly make an impact. You can do this. And don't be afraid. It's nothing you've ever heard of before, but you have the opportunity to learn just like I'm learning. And I had a meeting with Martin, who is our founder and CEO, and joined Octavia pretty much the very same day we had that meeting in a very tiny apartment in Kilimani, and building our first director capture prototype in an apartment. So our neighbors weren't very happy with us. But since then, we've grown to a team of 47, 2 factory facilities, building at scale jack machines, and working towards Project Hummingbird, which is a direct air capture and storage project that we're working on. Capture capacity of 1,000 tons a year towards to come online in October of 2024. So incredibly exciting. And where I see African CDR going, and the one word is growth. And I think you can take the Octavia story from that and kind of plug into that. And we need all the tools, like Julio put it very lovely, towards the right policy and regulations. And Bianca is doing a very lovely job on that. And towards finance. And as project developers, we also have to take on the mantle of that towards de-risking. And I'm sure buyers of credits and investors are incredibly interested in that. So one word I won't draw on too long is growth. And I think the Octavia story is testament to it.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing and the inspiring work of yourself and Octavia for so many other um, young people, entrepreneurs, organizations, startups around the continent, which brings us perfectly to financing and the pipeline. So Caitlin Kinjani is this pioneer doing federal work, seeking out new innovators and innovations and innovative startups. How are you seeing the pipeline? How do you see the future, in terms of investing and the possibilities for really creating the robust capital markets that we need to really innovate and scale CDR on the continent?
Awesome, thanks. I think I'll pull up on two themes that have already been discussed, one on growth and one on arithmetic. So as been mentioned, minerals are there are lots on the continent, but if we're going to hit any of the net zero goals, we need something like 3 to 44 times more critical minerals being mined. And we have a lot of those on the continent, and that's to go into wind turbines and batteries. And there's a way to do it that's restorative from the start. And another one is just the population on the continent. By 2100, there's going to be 40% of the global population. So there are going to be a whole lot of materials and mega cities that are going to be going up. And so if we can incorporate carbon negative materials into this, there's a way to grow green from the start, which is much easier to do rather than trying to retrofit it post. And so, just picking up on two innovations that fit into those themes. One is a Botswanan startup where they are looking at using biochar, inoculating it with a certain type of bacteria that binds to sulfates, which is a way to clean up wastewater that's currently not able to be used, get it to agricultural grade water use, and then the biochar is sinking the carbon. So that could then be buried, or if it's good quality, it could be applied to the soils. So that's a case where you've got really great co-benefits. And another one is actually in the lab in the University of Cape Town, where they've developed a catalyst that's separating plastic, waste plastic, into hydrogen and carbon nanofibers. Those carbon nanofibers can then be used in concrete. It displaces the amount of plasticizer that's used, which is also bad for the environment. And then the hydrogen can be used in clean fuels for transport. So I think there's some of these kind of really unique innovators that are bringing together different themes, and the opportunity for scale is there. We just need to come together as an ecosystem with all the financiers at different stages, because we need different funding at the early stage compared to when you need to scale. And so it's really about building an ecosystem and helping get some of this IP out of the labs and also accessing carbon credits. So it's really cool to hear from the different perspectives, and we all need to work together more to accelerate this.
Can I ask you one more question, Caitlin, or anyone else? Are you seeing this another area that's so exciting, which is negative carbon products of various kind, starting to really emerge on the market in Africa? Where are we with that? What are some exciting stories and examples of negative carbon products? So, we know around the world negative carbon building materials, plastics. We even have negative carbon poultry farms now coming online. So what's happening on the continent about that? Because that's also, in addition to carbon credits, a revenue generating way, right? You have products that we can get onto the market that can replace current ones. So if you or anyone wants to jump in on that, maybe Julio. Yeah.
I'm happy to pick up
Yeah.
on one, and then I'll pass over to Julio. So going back to the mineral example, where actually mine waste can be used as a supplementary cementitious material, which is basically a drop-in replacement for cement, which, by the way, is 8% of global carbon emissions today. So that's a really great way where you're solving a problem where you've got a lot of excess waste to be a solution to be carbon negative from the start in the buildings. And do you want to build on other solutions?
Yes, and then I'm afraid I'm going to have to
No problem.
see how these things go.
It's
Um, Taking off this example of the mine wastes, Africa is rich with a specific kind of mine waste from the diamond mines, from the base metal mines. Those are able to rapidly mineralize CO2, so you can actually generate carbon credits just from working the wastes. There's a company called Arca based in Canada that just literally stirs the mine wastes and gets carbon removal from that and sells the credits. Like that's pretty cheap and
that's
easy.
amazing.
On the far side of this, you could, if you're pulling CO2 out of the air like Octavia, in the near term, you want to be able to put that to work and get paid for it. Putting CO2 into concrete is one way to do that. And actually, there's a number of companies out there, Carbon Cure, Carbon Built. There's other ones that are coming up on the continent themselves, indigenous technologies that can do the same. For those companies, actually, they are making a better product. The concrete is stronger, so you use less material. It is made with fewer total emissions, and as it's just a fine solution of all kinds, but it's one that can go readily out of the gate. Last but not least, we are starting to finally see synthetic fuels coming alive. And turning carbon dioxide into fuels today is extremely expensive. If only you had access to super low cost renewable energy that was abundant and obvious. Again, that sounds like Africa again. And actually, the most immediate market for those is going to be in maritime shipping. Methanol, basically, and e-methanol as a fuel, biomethanol as a starting point, and thinking about the industrial hubs that people like Bilha and others at Great Carbon Valley are putting together, I see opportunities there to start with those really out of the gate quite quickly.
Thank you so much. It's great. Anybody else want to say anything about this particular? Go ahead, please, Bianca.
When I'm thinking about it from a policy perspective, I think we've heard our president saying very often carbon credits will be the next big export. So when we look at other products, that have the potential to be exported, then this is also fantastic because then they can be used locally, but now we're looking at also improving the economy by being exporters of these negative products. So I think for one that it's something that we should promote, and regulatory space should incentivize these sort of projects and be innovative around it.
Thank you so much. And with Continental Africa Free Trade Agreement, right? Bianca, there's such opportunities. Thank you so much, Julio. Stay safe and healthy, my friend. There's so much opportunity for intra-African trade, let alone exports outside of the continent. So this is a really great growth opportunity. Anything else the panelists want to say before we open up to questions from the audience? Anything that struck you or you want to add to the conversation? One thing I do want to mention is we don't have the representatives on the marine-based, ocean-based side, but as we said at the beginning, huge, massive opportunities. We know the president of Tanzania is really advancing and trying to do this and safe, durable, again, the same principles. Many other possibilities here. Our colleagues at Ocean Visions are working with many, scientists on the ground. And this goes back to then maybe the second point before I pass it back to you, Caitlin, is indigenous local science and technology that develops and does the research and development all the way from the front end, from the basic science all the way to commercialization. So, Caitlin, over to you.
No, I just that reminded a thought on another innovation that's based in Kenya and Tanzania, where they are training local communities, coastal communities, on how to grow a certain type of seaweed, aggregating that seaweed, and then being able to feed that into the biofuels or bioplastics space. So then you are then displacing other chemical uses. And I really like that because it's also thinking about how you can reward the communities that can enable scale, and that's really important as we're thinking about a just transition and scaling, is how can we ensure that lots of the people who are on the ground who are going to be able to adopt these technologies and scale it in the timeframes that we need are brought along the journey, not only from a climate resilience perspective but also from an economic perspective. So just wanted to add
That's
that
a
thought.
great example. Any questions from the audience? We have someone with their hand raised right away. That's do we get a mic? Otherwise, I can take it over to. Do we have other mics? Okay, yeah, just go bring it over to you. Oh, I can't do that. Oh well, too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
My
you.
name is Jessica Mukoti. I work for Oxford Net Zero at the University of Oxford. James mentioned that you see CDR leading to greater demand for renewable energy and so scaling up of renewable energy on the continent. How could you just maybe for the panelists, could you just expand on that a bit? Thank you.
Okay, does somebody want to take that, or should we bring James back up? Maybe James, you could jump back in on this way. You're part of us. So come on, we're one family. So you got the question, right? CDR, renewable energy, the virtuous loop that's possible.
Yeah, thank you. The challenge you have with renewable energy, so I'll make this very tangible, very practical. There's this paradox of energy poverty in Africa. We have the best renewable energy resources on the planet, and yet we cannot afford to actually build out. We're starting to solve distributed energy, rooftop solar for local use. With industrial energy, there's just none. Our industrial energy systems are extremely expensive because we're not unlocking that renewable. You ask the question, why isn't that happening? And invariably, the reason is you can't finance large scale renewable energy projects because you're doing them based on the government's guarantee using the national utility. The government is poor, so it can't afford to commission large amounts of new power. There's no new power, so the power that's there is expensive. The power is expensive, so industry doesn't come. Industry doesn't come, so the government is poor. Keep going around that circle again and again and again. You break that cycle by being able to identify large demand for power and bringing that, and then building the renewable energy to service that. That's generates revenue. It increases the scale of your power projects. It increases the amount of energy that's available to potentially go onto the grid. And suddenly you're on the virtuous cycle where you have a little bit of surplus power. You can make it available for new industry. That new industry pays taxes, wants more power. You can invest in that, and so on. So what you're looking for is those big anchor loads. If you look at the way Ghana, for example, built their grid, they started off with aluminium refining for Akosombo Dam. But then they lost track of that. We're going back to that, but then now using 21st century examples of green energy use cases. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you so much, James. Any other questions from our audience? So I have a question for including you, James. What is, if you pick the major barrier for us to get to where we need to go, what would that be? What's the one major barrier? Maybe it's not the only one, but the one major barrier that you would want to get us, we need to, remove to really get to where we need to go.
I think I'll go fast, and I think towards the entirety of COP, I think I'm sounding like a bit of a broken record. But at least for Octavia and deep climate tech in Kenya and Africa, what keeps me up at night is finance. I can tell you firsthand, it's incredibly difficult to raise capital towards deep climate tech and very capex heavy. It is infrastructure, it is manufacturing, and just the full capital stack as well towards the early developmental stage, towards pilot deployment, and towards large scale deployment as well. So if I had a magic wand, and I could waive it, I would put it and waive it at finance and just unlock all the finance that we possibly can, because by virtue of being in Africa and deploying direct air capture in Africa, sometimes I think we have a lot to offer. James put it well, that we have the natural endowments. Okay, great. So what next? Finance. Yeah.
You flipped the question that I normally ask, which is, what if you had a magic wand? How would you use it? I love it. Let's flip the question, building on that. If you had a magic wand, the other panelists, how would you use it? What one thing would you change to get us to where we need to go?
I think I very much align also with the finance thing, but for us, as we are in the land use sector, I would say that I would put digitalization and e-government systems everywhere. So that's what we need, and that's also will help us as a nature-based carbon project to be, well monitored, to be secure, because upfront investments are very huge for establishment. And so digitalization, is that what we are lacking clearly, that could solve the land issues as well, to protect the communities. And yeah, that's my quickest answer.
Right. So we've got finance and digitalization. Bianca.
Finance. Because just to put it into perspective, and I think we'll take us back to the Nairobi Declaration, 2% of global renewable energy investment over the past decade was Africa. 2%. Yeah. So and Kenya's potential, saying geothermal, is 10,000 megawatts. So really, this discussion is about the finance. And if we're ever going to have these hubs that James is talking about that do both the tech and the industries, we need to get the finance coming in. So I'll just leave it at that.
Very good. We'll go to Caitlin, and then we'll end with you, James.
If I had a magic wand, I would ask for two things. One is for collaboration between lab spaces, not only on the continent, but also with other universities around the world, where just getting those early proof points and being able to get IP out of universities and into commercial deployment. I think there's a lot that we could do to accelerate that. And two is to get more corporates who are also trying to get their heads around how they decarbonize and how they do that within their supply chain, to be open to trialing different innovations and giving feedback to them as they're going, because we need both on the very early stage innovators thinking about how we can solve it, but they need to be developing solutions that are going to be used to help accelerate that journey.
Just before you go, James, just on these two, we had one of our great colleagues from Octavia visit us at ASU at the Center for Carbon Negative Emissions, exactly what you're talking about, these partnerships between labs. And our next session, the next hour, is very much around how can industry play a huge role in terms of the ways that you're doing. So with that, over to you, James. A magic wand?
If I had a magic wand, I'd say that hopefully coming out of this COP in particular, we can have everyone who's passionate about addressing the climate crisis get out of their little individual silos. We keep saying we're going to need all of the above, and then people start saying, oh, but you're talking too much about industrialization. Why aren't you talking about forest protection? Why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about that? And we really do need to have a whole of society mobilization around how do we deploy all these things as quickly as possible? How do we permit quickly? How do we assess environmental impacts quickly? We don't have 10 years to decide whether to do something or not. We have to be moving fast, and that means everyone understanding that we're all on the same team.
Thank you so much. If I could add my two to this final segment, number one is for us to go, what you were saying, James, and everyone, not only break down the silos within the climate community, but to really get vastly out there to mass publics. Why I start with my mother and children is because those folks don't know what this is about. And if they do, they really believe in it. They are our partners and our supporters and the people and the communities that we want to serve. So let's get the messages out well beyond the climate community, well beyond the COPs, and really promote what carbon removals can do in terms of climate positive sustainable development. The second is leadership from governments. It is absolutely essential. We know we can't scale any industry, any sector in the world without the leadership of governments. We're deeply grateful, as you all know, to President Ruto. Now the governments of these other four countries that are advancing the global carbon removal pledge with 50 plus non-state art party organizations. I want to thank Priya Yadev, who's our carbon removal manager at the Climate Champions. If you're interested in the pledge, helping us either sign up or to get more governments on board, please talk to her or to me. It's absolutely critical. Without government leadership, we're not going to get to where we need to go. Let me end by saying a few more thank yous to our incredible friends and partners at the Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory. You know, I am a professor at Thunderbird and at the Wrigley GFL Global Futures College. This combination is really a special one when you bring together the science, the technology, the innovation that is happening on the Wrigley side with the global leadership, management, policy, business from the Thunderbird School, it's really an incredible combination. And we work all over in the world in great partnership with incredible friends like this. So I want to thank our partners from Wrigley, and particularly Julie Wrigley, who's been such a great supporter, our president, President Crow, and finally, of course, back at Thunderbird, all of our incredible team, Ghazal Khorshidi, Mohammed El Sihimi, so many others that make it possible for me and us to do the work that we do. Please stay safe and healthy, everyone. Let's get the carbon removal movement growing and expanding worldwide, and particularly, let's not have a sleeping giant, but a very much alive and awake giant moving forward into the 21st century. A big round of applause, these tremendous leaders. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to take a 5-minute break and we're going to bring up our next session, which is very much around the private sector and demand generation from with our partners from WBCSD. So please stay around. It's going to be a fantastic session. Thank you all. State University. Along with the Julie Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory and College, we run the university-wide SDGs initiative. ASU is ranked #1 in the United States for SDG impact, #2 worldwide, and we're proud to contribute to that. ASU is also ranked #1 for innovation, but perhaps the most important part of ASU is our charter, which starts from the principle that we judge ourselves by who we include, not who we exclude. For us at Thunderbird, our vision is a world of sustainable and equitable prosperity and peace. And our mission is to empower global leaders and managers, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs to advance sustainable and equitable prosperity and peace, utilizing and harnessing the new technologies, capabilities, and technologies of the 21st century, particularly the fourth industrial revolution. We're #1 ranked in international trade worldwide, recognized as a top #1 school for international management business for over 77 years. We're really honored and excited to partner with WBCSD, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, truly one of the vanguard platforms, networks, communities, bringing together business to advance sustainable development in many, many, many areas all around the world. So many companies that are benefiting from the support, the platform, the engagement, the sharing and learning. Within that, increasingly, we're grateful to the WBCSD for advancing work on carbon removal. Our partner here, Neil, is going to talk about in a second the new report or guidance that they've put out for companies on how to embrace and bring in carbon removals into their net zero commitments and plans. And so we're really, really excited about this. We have a fantastic set of 2 panels that will follow. But without further ado, let me bring my great friend, brother Neil, from WBCSD, leader of the carbon removal area for the WBCSD. Neil?
Thank you so much, Sanjeev, and thank you again for all of your leadership in this space and bringing together such a diverse and growing community around carbon removal. So thank you, and thank you, Priya, also for your coordination and leadership too. So it's a pleasure to be here, and great to see you all. As Sanjeev mentioned, I represent the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and if you don't know who we are, in essence, we're a club of about 250 companies, easy way to say. Really, we want to advance sustainable development within business and beyond through this community. And these are some of the biggest multinationals in the world. And there's some really core parts of what we do and what we believe. And we truly believe that business has an enormously role to play in advancing sustainable development, and that the world is starting to realize that business is a trusted partner for that. And to do that, we need to drive accountability within business, but we also need to help companies be accountable. And we believe that accountability can drive better recognition from capital markets, which incentivizes more ambitious climate, equity, and nature action. So I'm not going to spend too long, but in terms of carbon removal, we're quite new to this space. We're a big community of companies, and that represents a very large potential demand for buy. I heard a pretty amazing statistic during New York Climate Week that only 0.5% of companies with an SBTi aligned target have made any investment into durable carbon removal. And that's alarming. I think so. It was quite clear that the role that we could play is to drive demand for responsible removal deployment and within business, and capacity building is core to that. We recently launched a guide to carbon dioxide removal that helps companies develop a strategy and tactical approaches to investing responsibly. And my colleague Julio from the National Climate Solutions Alliance does a lot of great work in promoting investment into nature restoration and preservation. And we holistically put these together and help companies understand how to build portfolios. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm really excited to welcome some great innovators in the climate tech and first movers on the buy side. I'm going to pass very briefly over to our virtual Philip Moss for a keynote.
Hello, my name is Philip Moss. I am the chair of the NextGen CDR facility, the world's largest owners of long-term technological carbon removals, or CDRs as we call them, providing advanced market commitments on behalf of a number of leading companies, including Boston Consulting Group, BP Group, Mitsui OSK Lines out of Japan, Swiss Re, and UBS. The company was established as a joint venture in 2022 to help companies manage a diversified portfolio of these long-term carbon removals, allowing them to benefit from access to credibly certified CDRs at a more competitive price that was available on the market, while offering a number of risk diversification benefits with a focus on scalable technological CDR solutions. I'd like to start by thanking Thunderbird ASU, the UN Climate Champions, and the WBCSD for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person, but as I'm sure you know, Blue has been a little bit of a challenge today. So I was asked to provide you with some introductory comments about why businesses are buying into this space. You may have heard that CDR prices range from the hundreds of dollars a ton to thousands of dollars a ton, which is true, without contributing to companies' decarbonization efforts. So I think the first thing that we need to look at is acknowledging that there is no net zero without having removals or negative emissions as part of the overall mix. We need to ensure that any emissions that are generated are neutralized through a reduction of emissions in the atmosphere. The IPCC has recognized the importance of this and calls for carbon removals. And recently, the UN high-level climate champions have called for 3.5 gigatons of removals by 2030. 500 million of these tons should be removed for at least 100 years. But the market's challenging. And while there's a lot of interest in carbon removals and new companies are popping up every day with new offers of supply and different approaches from a technology perspective, there is a lack of a clear demand signal. And expensive pricing means that many of these projects may not get developed over time. And we may see a shortfall in supply moving forward as we get towards the end of the decade and compliance targets kick in and those hard to abate emissions become more difficult to effectively offset. To date, the market uptake has been fairly slow. We only have about 20 companies to date that have purchased 10,000 tons of CDRs or more. We come to a total of around 5 million tons of total commitments across the CDR space. Microsoft, which is the largest buyer in the space, constitutes about 60% of that overall volume. And 150,000 tons of that has been delivered to date. So we still have a very, very long way to go. And I know there has been some perceptions in the market that if we just wait over time, the prices will come down, the projects will scale, and we'll be able to access at a more affordable price. However, if we don't have that demand driver coming forward today and ensuring those projects can secure the offtakes they need in order to get built, we aren't going to see those economies of scale, and we're not going to have the supply coming online when it's needed the most at the end of the decade. So that's what NextGen has been working on. Buyers in the market by providing them with a portfolio approach, which allows them to diversify their risk, and offering an average target price based on the portfolio that we see, $200 a ton. It enables them to not only fix the price from a procurement standpoint, but it provides them with a lot of information and data about the market, everything from what are the emerging technologies, how can they get attractive pricing on certain types of projects. We offer an opportunity for these buyers to share their due diligence and their market intelligence. I think probably most importantly, it's an opportunity or a platform that allows peer institutions to be able to share some of their key reputational risk concerns with other buyers, ensuring that every buyer is coming along for the ride and understands the projects as well as everyone else. Tonight, we've closed on close to 200,000 tons, and hopefully we'll be doing some more fairly shortly. They will all be, all the projects we work on will be certified under our IPROA standard, provide greater comfort to our buyers around the quality associated with these projects. So it really is a case of just layering on a number of different levels of risk mitigation to ensure that buyers can get comfortable with committing to these projects. I know you're going to get started on a panel now. Again, I'm very sorry that I can't join and contribute my thoughts, but I thought I would leave you with 3 real calls to action from a corporate standpoint. I think the first I would ask all the companies in the room today and to those that you're talking to would be to establish a removals target and tie that to an internal CDR price. And when I say removals, I think that there's room and scope, obviously, for nature-based solutions. However, what we'd really like to see is a commitment to long-term, durable carbon removal solutions that can be stored with high confidence for over 100 years. This will become an important part of a net zero strategy moving forward, and will be vital to put this into an internal carbon price in order to secure C-suite commitment. Our buyers have successfully done this. Swiss Re is one of our buyers who has a internal carbon price today of $200 a ton that will be implemented full time at the end of the decade in 2030. And this is allowing them to participate in some of these projects, which will be first of their kind in many ways. Secondly, I would just encourage you all to start buying today. It's really a case of purchases and allowing yourselves not only to be prepared for your future purchasing, but also to get yourself access to a number of these suppliers at an early stage. As I said, we do think that supply may become constrained towards the later half of the decade as demand starts to grow. And it's important that US companies are able to hedge your positions and have participation in some of these projects. Finally, I think what we have seen, particularly for those companies that are just getting into the market or just trying to understand it, is to pursue a portfolio approach. We would certainly encourage you to take direct offtakes from a number of projects out there. However, there's obviously risks associated with that. There's a binary risk as it relates to the technology. There's a risk as it relates to the geography and the project developer as a whole. And for new companies just looking to dip their toes into the sector, we would recommend a purchasing pool like a NextGen to help mitigate some of those potential risks that come from direct purchases, as well as to lower the overall costs associated with diligencing these projects and getting expertise on hand to understand them. Many of the technologies in this sector are very nascent. A lot of them, I would say the majority of them, don't have necessarily methodologies that can be certified. So you see a lot of projects that won't necessarily be certified in the space. And that obviously just adds to the risk level. And lastly, I think it's worth noting, as it relates to the portfolio approach, that the policy is very much evolving, having lots of discussions with policymakers at the moment who are looking at ways to regulate or provide safeguards to ensure that these technologies and the investments in removals is not detracting from different decarbonization efforts. And so taking one project risk is certainly something that for new entrants into the space, we would urge you to be very cautious about. So with that said, thank you very much for your time. I hope to be able to connect with some of you after the session, and I wish you all the very best for this panel today.
Well, Philip, thank you. Yes? Okay, thank you very much. So thank you, Philip. He's a great leader in our space. Funny story, how we got into carbon removals. We did an event at WEF in January 2020. It was the first dinner event, sort of launch of the carbon removal task force, right as the pandemic was emerging. Philip was still at WEF. He was thinking about his next steps. He joined the dinner, and 4 years later, you see where he never had thought about carbon removals before that. So just to give you a sense of where we've come. We have now, I'm a dean of a global business school. I'm also carbon removal lead at the Climate Champions, founder of the Global Carbon Removal Partnership. But as a business school dean, as an economist, markets are what we talk about all the time. And of course, for markets, we need demand and supply. Philip has focused a lot on the demand side, and we have panels, thanks to Neil and colleagues from WBCSD, on both sides. We're going to flip them since Philip talked about demand. So we're going to ask our folks on the demand panel to please join us, if you can. Watanabe-san and everybody, Neil, thank you so much. wonderful session on markets, growing markets for carbon removal in Africa, is introduce yourself. Neil, you already have, but I want to ask a specific question. Introduce yourself for our other colleagues to introduce yourself and your organizations, and not only why your organizations are engaged in carbon removal, but and particularly on the demand side, but what it means to you personally. Why is this important to you personally? So, Neil.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And you probably don't see my face on the screen. So Scarlett, unfortunately, is unwell today. So I'm jumping in on her behalf. So I've described why carbon removal is important to WBCSD. So I'll just, for me personally, it gives me a sense of optimism. The whole topic of carbon removal, it's an inherently optimistic topic. You know, it's talking about climate positive solutions, and one of the sort of few areas where it just instills a sense of optimism. And I find that really inspiring. And I, as a chemical engineer, I get very excited about anything to do with technology, and there's some great innovations in the technology space. So I think it's something I'm super passionate about.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Paulina Ponce de Leon. I am a managing director and partner with BCG. BCG has set a net zero target for 2030. And clearly, after reducing as much as we can, we will need to address any remaining emissions that we have. And we're pursuing a portfolio approach for that. Engineered removals are very much a part of that strategy. We have set an $80 a ton on average internal carbon price that will inform our investments, and we think we can play a catalytic role in helping the technology scale and actually reduce or become more commercially viable so that everyone can access them. Personally, I think we need to be promoting every solution out there and learning more about them, making sure that we share what works and what doesn't so that we can scale them and really tackle these problem plus there, and then we can continue.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. I'm Watanabe, Chief Sustainability Officer of MOL. MOL is a Japanese company active in maritime industry, especially in the international shipping. So I came here from one of the hard to abate sector. So I'm very happy if I can make my contribution to secure the diversity of participants here sitting here. And we issued our environmental plan in June 2021. So more than 2 years ago, then our net zero journey started. And our plan is we have already announced to the public our target of net zero emission from our fleet of vessels by 2050. Then we plan. Our plan is to achieve the target by mainly by two approaches. And the first is to convert the vessel fuel from the conventional heavy fuel oil to the various type of new clean fuels. And the second is that we try to install the onboard devices for the more voyage efficiency, including the Wind Challenger, which is MOL's own technology to get to the wind assist. We have already realized that we can reduce only 90% of our entire emission from our value chain. So the third solution in the space of CDR is quite essential for us to achieve our final goal. So we rely on the rest 10% of our emission, and we like to offset the emission by the CDR credit.
Thank you so much, Watanabe-san. If I could come back to you and then come to Paulina, back to Neil. you made the case of why you all got to a point where you said, we need removals for 10% to get to net zero. Um, the math is clear for companies, for countries and for the planet. But how did you convince, or how were you able to persuade leadership inside the company in addition to the math? Because the math seems to be very clear, and yet there are many companies that still haven't been able to make that leap. So what were the questions? What were the difficulties in making the case? And then how did you ultimately succeed for you and then Paulina and then obviously Neil as you're talking to other companies?
Can I start?
Please,
Yeah,
Pak Namsat.
thank you. Yeah, quite good question. I'm a sustainability officer of a company in hard to avoid sector, so my life is not always easy.
Yeah. It's never easy.
Yeah, but yes, so when we decided to start our activity or attempt in the space of CDR, we especially for the knowledge about the technology-based CDR, our organization didn't have any resources or expertise or skill or also the network to carry it out efficiently. And so we that was the reason why we decided to be one of the anchor buyer of the next gen. Actually, I'm based in Tokyo, but I came here via Zurich in Switzerland and attend the next gen's the first annual summit held there. Then what why we are so decided is if we anyway we need the huge amount of CDR for the achievement of our final goal. If we behave in the attitude of the free rider today, uh, I I'm sure in such case we will not be able to get to the sufficient supply of CDR in some point of the future where we need to achieve our final goal or milestone to the final goal. So MOL is also very pragmatic to be the first mover or early adopter, and I, and only if we will be the first mover, we can get to the good the relation, or we can get to the strong presence in the CDR market. We moved or we decided beforehand that the many other the peers in hard to avoid sectors recognized the necessity to to uh, to establish the tight relation with the supplier side project of CDR.
Thank you so much, Paulina. How did you convince everybody at TCG?
Because it was a one woman effort. No, it's always
You're the leader. You're our leader. You're our champion.
it's a team effort. But you're getting at what's the business case, right? And there's an element of the why, the what, the how much. Um, on the why, obviously, we recognize that climate is something that we need to address. Actually, for BCG, our biggest headache and our biggest challenge are our scope 3 emissions, which are driven by how much we fly. And that is, we are not a hard to abate sector, but our emissions are very much tied to a hard to abate sector. And so recognizing that we need to tackle that is a big part of the why. Then there's a question of what are the solutions available out there and what do we actually need by 2030? We expect yes, to need the engineered removals, DAC especially. We know that it needs to scale. We know that it's very expensive, right? So right now you can get up to $500 a ton for something like that, or between that and SAF, and we need the price to come down. From our perspective, getting involved in this now helps us learn. helps us secure a better price than what will be available in the future, so we can lock that in together. And if we do it with others, we can actually help manage the risks that are involved. There are plenty of risks, right? There's the pricing risk, there's the delivery risk, there's the perception risk. And so we think we are learning together. We are playing that catalytic role by signaling demand that companies need right now and actually helping drive the scaling of these solutions. Um, and all of that benefits us as a company, but I think it also benefits our clients. And we do think that at the end of the day, our biggest impact is through our clients. So the more the more we know about this, the more we learn, the more we can engage clients in this part of the ecosystem. I think the better for everyone.
Actually, can I build on that before we go to Neil? I mean, that's exactly right. A BCG can, internally its own model and approach to this, but how it then advises, supports its clients. What are you gathering and hearing as you engage other of your clients in trying to adopt, embrace CDR as part of their net zero and beyond strategies?
I think it's very similar, right? And you always need to meet people where they are. Um, More and more companies are recognizing that this is a responsibility as much as an opportunity. A lot of it is about understanding where emissions come from, what are the drivers, and again, what do you need to bet on. So we help clients understand the market, understand the trends, and really figure out how should they be engaging with the different solutions that are out there, um, to have access to those solutions, and more importantly, to the know-how
Yeah.
of how to implement them.
Thank you so much. Neil?
Well, firstly, I think I'd really like to thank BCG and MOL's leadership here. I think without the
Tremendous.
leadership of your companies, like that, we would not have a chance of scaling carbon removals. I think so. Thank you. So from WBCC perspective, we really tried to unpick why it is that companies aren't trying to invest in carbon removals, and there's a very wide range scale of why that is the case. I mean, firstly, there's from the outright skepticism of the whole concept of carbon removal, which is concerning. And there's the question of moral hazards, removals versus reductions, and then the association with the oil and gas industry. There's so many challenges that we have to overcome through capacity building. I think, and I really like to hear from what's going on at this COP, a lot of positivity around it, and that's really good to see. And then there's the literacy angle around carbon removal. So a lot of companies are have challenges enough trying to become net zero within their value chain. But when considering outside value chain actions, there's a lot of work going on around the voluntary carbon market on nature restoration and preservation. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges recently in that market, which companies have slowed back investments. The carbon market has responded to that. By association, that has an impact on carbon removals, with hesitation in getting involved in that space. And then thirdly, I think definition of what the journey to net zero, I think there is a perception it's a long way away, the point of net zero. We're not quite thinking about what the end point looks like and how the journeys to be to get there. And actually even what the end point is, what are residual emissions, what they count and so on. So that there's a whole wide range of reasons we see. Well, I think the two ways that I like to kind of phrase it and communicate it is that it's risk mitigation. I think investing in carbon removals today, it's making sure that you have access to the supply that you need for net zero. And that is not just building the market, but is also creating the relationships with the suppliers and creating those offtake agreements so that you can secure your supply. If it's a supply constrained market, it's going to be a major issue. And then the secondly, it's a really fantastic business opportunity. If you have the opportunity to put carbon removals in your value chain, built environment, it's a great opportunity there. Chemical industry, great opportunity there as well. So, and such a booming market potential. There's a great time to be in, whether you are in the value chain, whether you're investing directly or want to partner with organizations. So I think risk and opportunity. The last thing I'd like to say, I think the challenge is there's no real recognition through capital markets for your ambition at the moment. And that's something that WBCC is really trying to change by creating a frictionless accountability system that connects all of the efforts and frameworks in the voluntary and compliance space such that the capital markets really recognize with standardized disclosure and transparency systems, and companies will be rewarded for that. And if carbon removals is recognized as a core part of that, then there becomes an incentive.
Thank you so much, Neil. Let's build on that, particularly when we go to now the standard certification policy frameworks enabling environment. Prior to COP, we had 100+ CEOs climate CEO saying that, we need governments to do more on several things, included, scaling up renewables and so forth and so on. The third item on that letter to governments was we need governments to really step up on carbon removal in terms of policy frameworks and enabling environments, incentives, and so forth. And so the private sector can't do it by itself. The public sector has to be involved. What do we need? What do you all need from the public sector and the quasi-public sector, the voluntary markets in terms of standards and certification to really, really be able to scale up your investments in carbon removal? So we can go in reverse order.
Sure. I think from a government perspective, I think I'd like to recognize the pledge that was announced yesterday. Amazing leadership and vision and ambition there. That sets a great demand signal straight away and reassures companies that, actually this is not a fad. There's momentum here. It's being pushed by government. So that level of commitment is exactly what's needed. I think that there's a whole range of incentives and pushes that are needed. I think probably the clearest one would be for companies to set, countries to include it within their NDC targets, and that provides the next level of demonstration of what is really needed. And I voluntary demand is great and voluntary action is great, but I fundamentally don't think that's going to get us there without some degree of compliance and public procurement of carbon removals. And I think market stimulation from the public sector is key here, and both compliance market and public procurement will be key to that. I'll probably pass on for time's sake.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll offer two things. I think from the government perspective, things like the IRA are fantastic, right? We need additional funding, we need patient capital, we need all sorts of incentives to, again, just keep investing and scaling the solutions that we need. The second piece is we do need that clarity around how companies should be using these solutions, and that is the role that ICBCM, VCMI, SBTI are playing. And the more those are interoperable and consistent with each other, and the more that they really bring integrity into that voluntary space, and companies actually know what to do and are not afraid of talking about what they're doing, because I think most of them want to do the right thing, are doing the right thing, should be rewarded for doing the right thing and learning together, the better.
Thank you so much, Paulina. Nabe-san?
Thank you. So let me add one thing from the viewpoint of the off-takers. Ideally, in the future, we are so happy if the only strictly certificated or strictly authorized the high integrity, high quality CDR will be able to be delivered and exist in the market, so that we will rest assured that when we decide to offtake the CDR, both from the compliance credit market and also voluntary credit market. But now especially the technology-based CDR is still in the initial stage of the development. So we buyer also need to learn the more about the expertise to how to choose the technology, or how to get the good procurement of the CDR. So the so and but so and having said that, I want the government or regulatory body to support us in the regulation side. And also, having said that, the price of CDR will have to be affordable, so that the wider potential the buyer can decide to in the credit market. So also we expect the strong support like IRA in the subsidy side.
Thank you so much. So one last question, just really briefly. If you had a magic wand, what would be one thing that could really move the needle forward for your company or for the sector? One thing, one really important thing that we could make a difference on to really move carbon removal forward.
I think for me that because I have to convince our stakeholder, including uh, our staff and the seniors inside the MOL. So I'm happy if the some of our peers in hard to abate sector also join the framework of the CDR like next gen.
Thank you so much.
I think we need that continuous signal of demand so that the investment comes and companies can continue to fail fast if they need to fail or just scale if they're going to be successful.
Thank you so much. And Neil?
I'm going to offer a different spin, and I think the what I would like to see is a generally clear pathway for climate mitigation actions in the business sector that puts carbon removal against other voluntary actions. So we've got um, nature preservation, nature restoration, and removals. A clear pathway for all of those should look like. So the removals has a clear space alongside other solutions because it's not clear. And I think we can't have this conversation about that, and it's not this or that; it's both. And it really has to be seen holistically, and that's not there right now. So.
Yeah, so having the dual targets is really critical. Well, thank you so much. We're going to bring up our supply side because you don't have a market without demand and supply. So let's have a round of applause for our incredible panel. Thank you so much for your leadership. This over to you. We're going to start the same way. We want to have you introduce yourself, what's your organization, why carbon removal is important to your organization, and why it's important to you personally, because in the end, we are human beings that, have to get up every day, be motivated, be inspired by what we do. So that would be wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you, Sanjeev and Priya, for all the work that you do. It's only day one of week 2, so let's try and keep the energy levels going.
We had a great fun night last night, so I think that got us back fired up again. So
yeah, and we need that to celebrate how far we've come, but also how far we need to go. And I'm Helen Bray from Puro Earth. We're a carbon crediting program for durable carbon removal. We have 6 methods to deliver the net in net zero, including biochar, enhanced rock weathering, direct air capture into storage. And over the last year, I'm going to talk supply side now, we've seen a doubling of our CO2 removal suppliers, a doubling. Wow. We're now at about 150 globally. We're in all continents around the world. And what I want to say is during our journey, we've been around for half a decade. We've reliably stored 500,000 tons out of the atmosphere. So 500,000 is big, but it's way off where we need to be. And I just want to say a call out here to our colleague. I was blown away by your role in the maritime sector. I've worked across maritime aviation, and the maritime sector still has a narrative of zero emissions, not net zero emissions. And I'd love to work more with you on your role there because we all know that hard to abate is going to need to be compensated by durable carbon removal. So that's a little bit of where we are. The buy side we've heard, but just a bit of a shout out to some of our progressive buyers because without those would be nothing. Stripe, Snap, Shopify, PayPal, Uber, McKinsey, BCG. I go on, part of next gen. All the advanced market commitments. I think I covered all the topics. I'm happy to do a final wrap up.
why do you do it? Why is this?
Why do I do it? My boss is at the back, so I'm going to give him.
He's a pretty nice guy.
I'm a scientist by training, and I love technology, and it's all about net zero. So if it was, I started out over 20 years ago, it was 80% reduction target by 2050 versus 1990. We didn't need removals. We've now stepped up. It's net zero. I fully support that. We need these technologies, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much. Please.
So thank you, Sanjay and Priya, for organizing this. I really appreciate this platform. So my story, I'm founder and CEO of Mati Carbon, and we are enhanced rock weathering based carbon removal company. And the reason I kind of got into this was not really to do carbon removal, actually. I wanted to get into this to do climate adaptation, because that is becoming more and more of an urgent necessity. And being a carbon removal guy for the last 7 years, I started a DAC company first. I realized we could use enhanced rock weathering as a tool for climate adaptation, specifically in the global south and for smallholder farmers. And that sort of gave us the impetus to start this journey of experimentation and using that in that setting. And today now we have about 7,000 farmers in our flow, and we have delivered about uh, 6,000 tons, 7,000 tons. We're at rate of about 10,000 tons a month deployment of material. That doesn't mean CDR of that much. CDR is about 2,000, 2,500 tons per month of deployment related CDR, which we are at. So we we believe that this is a necessity which we need to work on right now, because these are the most climate vulnerable folks in the world, about 100 million, or 100 million which we can access, I believe, through enhanced rock weathering solution of the 500 or so million of smaller farmers out there. And yeah, I mean, I was my journey from DAC to this kind of migrated because of this immense potential which exists. And I think the both DAC and enhanced rock weathering are important, and carbon removal as a whole is very important. We just talked about a lot about that, why that needs to happen. I think DAC is going to scale in the long run and will become the one of the big solutions. But in the current decade, I think more readily available, scalable solutions right now are required, and that's the reason.
Tremendous co-benefits involved in these solutions, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Hussein.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and hello. I don't know who is watching us.
Good morning,
Good
good
everyone.
afternoon, good evening.
Exactly. So I'm Hussein. I'm working for Climeworks, and my story is I'm a mechanical engineer by education, but I worked 15 years in consumer goods, selling shampoo, razors, and all of that. And then one day I decided that I needed to do something else, and I moved to the other side of the table, and I'm selling CDR. No, I'm
We're
not.
glad to have you on this side of the
Exactly,
table, Mark.
exactly. So at Climeworks, what we do, we extract CO2 directly from the air with large machines, filtering CO2 from the ambient air and storing it deep underground where it cannot escape anymore. So for the ones that didn't understand that, we are just a giant vacuum cleaner for CO2. And we work with more than 150 companies around the world. Some are the largest ones, some are friends here, like BCG, Microsoft, JP Morgan, and some that are even smaller, right? We even work, our fourth customer is a small distillery in the UK that has less than 5 employees. So there's no size to enter in CDR. So we built the first and largest direct air capture plant in the world in Iceland. And there we're working with our partner Carfix, where we are turning our CO2 into stone. So I was showing that to some people before, but I can pass it on if you want to touch CO2 directly captured from the air. This is CO2 that has been stored into the Icelandic basaltic rock, and the white dots that you see is carbon that has been, let's say, turned into a solid. So, what was your question?
You got him. You did it. While you're doing this, what does fireworks do? All right, so let's take it with you, Hussein. So, you know, like you said, first direct air capture plant in the world. Climeworks been a real leader, vanguard. And at the same time, you know the challenges for suppliers or the critics. You know, yes, you did it, but you can't really scale. It's not going to go fast enough. It's not safe. It's not truly durable. How do you address these critiques in the marketplace and beyond amongst policymakers? Lack of information, misinformation, disinformation.
Sure. There's a lot of critics, huh?
Yeah.
Do you have any positives? Okay.
Press the critics to
Let
get
me
to the
let me
positives.
let me let me share a few thoughts here, right? So one of the main one is to drive trust and credibility into what we do. So uh, earlier this year, in January, we delivered the first third-party verified carbon removal services to our clients. Meaning we had a third-party audit company called DNV in Norway that verified our methodology. So that's already kind of helping people getting trust. And later in the year, with Puro from Ellen, we announced a partnership to create the first direct air capture certification. That's going even further, right, to make sure that we are pushing the boundaries of high quality and high integrity to help people have trust. The other one I would say is we it's okay, I can put it like that, is the the proof is in the real life pudding. We need to make projects that are coming to life. So I'm showing you carbon capture already, right? So our first project, like I was saying to you, was in Zurich in 2017. We started doing that in 2017 in Zurich. So we started showing that. We did the Orca plant in Iceland in 2022. Next year, we're going to open a mammoth plant. Sorry, somebody is challenging me, I think. The mammoth plant that is 10 times larger than Orca. It's going to be the world's largest plant when it's operating next year. So we're showing that it's tangibly, that they can see it, they can get even the byproduct in their hands. So I think those are important. And then the last one is, like you said, is it scalable? We need to show that there is scalability. So we want to reach a 1 billion ton capacity by 2050. Today, I was saying we're opening a 40,000 ton plant next year. Our ambition is to hit, let's say, the first level in 2030 with 1 million ton capacity. And for that, we need to go beyond Iceland. So we announced a project in the US, which hopefully we will also have, let's say, the support of the DOE to scale in the very, let's say, large hundred of millions of funds. We announced project in Kenya. We talked before with the Great Carbon Valley and James Mwangi. So we are partnering that to bring direct air capture to Kenya. And 2 weeks ago, we announced Canada as well. So we are basically scaling that. And I think this will help us get to 1 million tons capacity by 2030. And just to finish, by 2030 to 2050, you need to multiply exactly what I just said by 1,000.
Yes.
To get to 1 billion by 2050. And that's where we looked at what has been done in the past. And actually, interestingly, renewables did that.
Yes.
In 2020, solar had a gigawatt of capacity deployed. 20 years later, we had a terawatt, which is 1,000 times more. So we can learn from that and really make sure that we have that capacity growing.
Thank you so much, Hussein. Same question, Jashandra. How do you address the critics, the challenges, the naysayers who say, this is nice, but it's not really important, or it's not viable, it's not scalable. Certainly in India, I'm sure you're facing a lot of it, right?
So I think in India, first of all, the awareness level for what we're doing is quite low, and I think in US and some of the European countries, carbon removal is still quite well understood. But
Oh, I wouldn't put it that far. Somewhat.
well, the communities and the sort of like regulatory bodies who we're dealing with are kind of amazed or don't even understand why we're doing that. And then when we talk about economics, they're like, "This is a fad. This will go away. Nobody's gonna $100 a ton, $200 a ton. Are you kidding me?"
Expensive.
Just they don't take us seriously. So it's a journey which people need to make in terms of explaining and getting them aware. But the good thing is that the markets exist. The voluntary carbon markets enable us to really sell to parties who are technically competent to really buy this today and start scaling it even in jurisdictions where maybe the local jurisdiction doesn't understand it and is not really very supportive. But at the same time, especially technologies which are early in the carbon removal, and there are so many solutions out there, what needs to be very, very well done is the MRV and the robustness of the scientific solution has to be uncompromisable. And if the biggest problem which I see in carbon removal suppliers world today is that everybody's running after trying to get to that gigaton, and companies starting out, startup is committing that, oh, our objective is to do 2035 a gigaton, and we are 5 people company today. I'm like, okay, thank you very much. How are you going to do a gigaton in 2035? But that's fine, and that objective and that mission is great, but what you have to be very careful about that, this is a early stage industry where a few buyers who are now buying, and they need to get the confidence and the warm and fuzzy then that nobody's pulling wool over their eyes. This is real, and the technology is competent, and the MRV is great. And so you have to go belts and braces. You have to go the extra mile, provide the scientific robustness on the MRV, and that is what's incumbent on all the suppliers like us to sort of make sure that the naysayers are quietened down. We don't want another guardian letter written about CDR.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I come over here, just one more question. We just had this great session on, scaling CDR in Africa. Huge opportunity, huge potential. What's exciting, Climeworks doing stuff in Kenya now is the globalization now of CDR. And what we see is this incredible opportunity for CDR to be scaled in the global south to be climate positive, sustainable development. How do we get more of that going, in your view? How do we get not just the Indian government, but others in South Asia, around the global south, to really embrace CDR and take it to scale?
Yeah, so the basic CDR, I mean, the nature-based CDR is happening already in the global south. The more technical engineering-based CDR, which is more permanent as well, is challenging for the global south because the research and the technology is really in the global north. And I particularly was able to access it because I am a global north person who looks like a global south person. But I have had the access of all these technologies, having built them myself with a company which I founded 7 years ago, doing common research. So the technology funding is sitting there, but the scale up potential is in the global south, and that technology transfer needs to happen, and that enablement that needs to happen. So one of the things which we are doing, and we are really a nonprofit entity, we are trying to scale and enable that MRV access to people who want to do that for global south, especially smallholder farmers. We realize we can't get to gigaton ourselves. We just don't have the management capability to really scale to that level, at least in the next decade or two. So we need to have thousands of these entrepreneurs enabled by global north technology so that they can become the change agents. We, and that technology sharing needs to happen. Otherwise, we will not reach the goals. And if so, and the other thing which I'd say is that one of the fundamental things that also needs to happen is buyers are all sitting in global north. And we talked about the voluntary markets which exist today, which are really a small amount right now of what we need. Long term, we need mandatory compliance markets to come in play. Now, how do I tell uh, uh, a citizen of US to put their taxpayer money to buy carbon from a carbon farmer or an ERW solution, which is being developed in Namibia, for example? That is taxpayer money going out straight out to develop an industry in another country. That whole rationalization, understanding, and public opinion building needs to happen now, because otherwise compliance markets will not automatically allow for global north citizen money going to the global south to buy carbon removal. And if we don't enable that, the global south carbon removal opportunity will die. So we need to ensure that the global north policymakers and citizens are brought to that awareness that this needs to be an important piece.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring it over here because Pro Earth, yourselves have been the pioneers, and not only pioneers in doing it, but really being incredible global advocates. So we want to get that. But I just want to say, we want to compliment though, that's why we have such a wonderful partnership with WBCSD, who's co-sponsoring, leading this session, is that we want to get though, right, Neil and colleagues, more demand from global South multinationals. And that's still viable. There's huge potential there, and that's a huge opportunity for all of us to work on, and certainly with WBCSD. So back to Pro Earth, again, pioneers. How has it changed in terms of making the case beyond your own business for the sector more broadly?
This is why we're at COP, aren't we? We're here to have those conversations with people we wouldn't normally be meeting with. And as a lobbyist, what can we do? I mean, we thank Climeworks for the initiatives that you've launched around separate targets for negative emissions and about bringing the community together, the high level champions. It sounds like WBSSD and their community. So how can we collaborate together? We've just issued a CDR policy meta map, trying there to map all the policies that can support CDR. And we're also looking very much at the corporate disclosure, environmental claims space, because governments are slightly more cautious around classically compliance markets, which maybe might not build a business case in any way. So please do look at that. Please collaborate with us. And I think, the final word on the voluntary carbon market that you've been talking about, we have global benchmarks now from the Integrity Council. We have codes of practice from the Integrity Initiative. These global benchmarks need to differentiate between the different types of carbon credits and recognize those more permanent solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would say that, we've been advancing not just MRV, particularly for carbon removals, as you know, it has to be MRVR remediation, because we know that we have that challenge of different types of solutions with different lengths of durabilities and risk factors for those durabilities. So last question, as we had for the first panel, a magic wand. You've got a magic wand in your hand. What's one thing that, you know, there are many things, but one thing you'd really like to see a block removed, something created, an incentive, one thing that can really take us forward?
I don't want one.
I know, none of us do.
Okay, let's go for it. At one block, I will go for building on your point. I would like at this COP for the CMA, the Conference of the Parties meeting as the parties to the Paris Agreement, to agree on their recommendations on removals and enable sort of investment and trade that you were talking about.
Right, see? Fantastic.
Yeah, since she's already wished that, so I'll not wish that. The other thing then we need to really enable is the multilateral banks need to come into carbon removal. They're right now sitting on the sideline. They're investing in nature-based. They're investing in solar and wind. They need to get big time into market building for carbon removals. So that's what I'd like to wish.
Fantastic points, both these two. Next one.
Yes, I think the people here and the people watching maybe will want me to say that I'll remove all the carbon in excess from the atmosphere, and then I get to find another job. Exactly. Then I find another job. No, I think we know that. I mean, Julio before was here and saying that we need what 1.6 gigaton of removals by 2030, right? And we
3.5, right?
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
By 2030?
Yeah.
Exactly. So how do we accelerate that, right? We know that it will be a systemic push, right? We need the market to accelerate offtake. We need the policymakers to also kind of create a political framework. We need the investors to, you know, invest into, let's say, pre-financing the industry and the plants. And we need the suppliers to build the supply chain. And I think if I focus now only on the first one, which I'm talking to companies uh, day to day, is if I can get 1 hour or 1% of them, that will help accelerate our scale up. What do I mean by that? If I get the amount of profit they make in 1 hour invested into that, that will significantly improve our scale up, or 1% of their profit annually, because that's what will take for some of them 10% of their residual emission out, which is what they're trying to achieve. So 1 hour or 1%, we're going to scale faster.
Fantastic. So I want to thank our panelists. Let me end with, 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote a white paper with some others on the $1 to $3 trillion market in financial terms, $3 to $5 trillion in economic value terms of the carbon removal, durable carbon removal market. We are still at the infancy, but growing rapidly thanks to these folks. We want to get to a point where we get to, I think, somewhere between $70 and $150 a ton. That's what really can get us moving in terms of exponential scale. But important to that is going to be the governments and public sector. And, we're seeing Article 6 negotiations, the removal still being pushed to the sidelines and so forth. So we, through 50 organizations around the world, now 4 governments have the Global Carbon Removal Pledge. It very much focuses on removals as a third pillar of climate transformation, alongside adaptation and dramatic reductions. It very much focuses on a whole of portfolio, natural, engineered, ocean-based, marine-based approaches. Very much about the 6 principles: equity and justice, accountability, inclusivity, uh, durability, performance, and safety. Responsible carbon removal promotes targets globally for 3 to 5 tons by 2030, 5 to 10 tons by 2040, and 10 to 20 tons by 2050. We're asking everyone to please embrace and endorse this pledge. You can find out more from Priya and myself. It's going to be on the Global Carbon Removal Partnership website. We're all supporting it. More governments are we need to have governments taking the leadership, and that will also lead to international organizations, development banks, and the rest. So please advance on that, get them into NDCs and so forth. It's a wonderful pledge. It's been a work of a lot of different people, and it can help us. Pledges generally, I'm not into, but in this case, for our sector, a pledge of this kind with government leadership, particularly government leadership from the global south, can make a big difference. So thank you to our great partners, Neil and WBCSD. We're super excited. Any final words, Neil, you want to say? Take the microphone real quick.
Very briefly, yeah, I was actually just going to share. We recently launched a guide report, and if you're interested, it should be there. So, I just yeah, thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you, Priya, for organising this event, and thank you so much for the speakers. And yeah, I hope you have a successful and safe rest of the COP.
Thank you so much. And can I have just another one? For us at the Julie Wrigley Global Futures Lab and College, the Thunderbird School of Global Management, Arizona State University, we're so excited and honored to have this partnership with WBCSD, the Climate Champions Carbon Removal Team, and the Global Carbon Removal Partnership. Thank you for the great conversation. Have a safe and healthy rest of your COP.